I'm Greg L. Thomas. Our circumstances don't make us or break us, but our attitude does. Booker T. Washington once said that the circumstances that surround our life are not important. How we respond to those circumstances are important because our response is the ultimate determining factor between success and failure. So, everyone faces setbacks, job loss, rejection, failure, but, two people can face the same, what can be perceived as a negative circumstances, and, they'll both have different outcomes because they perceive it differently. So what changed, not the event, but the mindset. So it's all about the mindset that we have. So what I want to talk to you about today is turning your attitude into magic. So let's talk about Booker T. Washington for a second. So Booker T. Washington was a slave. I don't know if you know who Booker T. Washington is, but he was a slave abolitionist. He started off as a slave, and he taught himself how to read. He taught himself how to write. And we all know that for a slave to know how to read and write during slavery was illegal. But not only did Booker T. Washington teach himself how to read and how to write, he ultimately became one of the most powerful men in the United States. Not just one of the most powerful black men. He actually founded Tuskegee University. Tuskegee University was an agriculture and management type of university. So what Booker T. Washington believed is that for black people to get themselves out of the oppression that we were experiencing back then, we had to gain some type of financial power. And because obviously most black people couldn't read and write then, the only way to do that would be through what they knew, which was trades, the brick masons, the field hands, the agriculture. And, those are the things that propel the foundation of a society. And so, although, most black people couldn't read and write then, we are the ones who are relied upon for our skill sets. And so Booker T. Washington felt that black people should leverage that. However, his nemesis during that time was a guy by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was a black man who was actually in academia at the time that Booker T. Washington was on the rise. Okay, so Booker T. Washington came to prominence by building Tuskegee University, and he became recognized and respected by the world. And he and W.E.B. Du Bois was at odds because although they were both advocating for the same thing, they had different ways of achieving it. All right, so Booker T. Washington was also oftentimes considered to be a sellout because people perceived him to be passive, if you will, where he wasn't passive at all. He was about real meaningful solutions that, if let's not just talk about black empowerment or upward mobility, but let's be about it. Let's use what we have to get what we want. And that's what Booker T. Washington was all about. But my point is that he started off as just a slave. I mean, this man, Booker T. Washington, was a slave, and he became one of the most powerful men in the United States. All right, so we're not victims of our circumstances, but we're architects of our own responses. You can't control the storm, but you can definitely, learn to sail from it. So life gives us raw material, and we become alchemists. We create gold from these raw materials, and it's all based upon our mindset and our attitude about it. You know, my personal story is similar to Booker T. Washington. As many of you know, I did 11 years in federal prison, but I didn't let that stop me. I mean, I wrote 6 books. I mean, while most people were, resigned to their circumstances and, just spending their time playing basketball and dominoes, which, I'm not opposed to whatever someone wants to do, but I spent my time doing legal work, legal writing, and writing books. And, I call it inspirational dissatisfaction. I became so dissatisfied with my circumstances that I decided to do something, unprecedented. That was, great. Writing 6 books from prison, that may sound easy now that, we have Chat GPT and all, but, back then there was no Chat GPT, and, in prison you're not allowed to have internet access. So that was that was something that you could consider, sensational to be able to write just 1 book in prison, but I wrote 6 books in prison. So anyway, the point is not to bolster myself in any way, but what I'm trying to say is that I didn't let my circumstances dictate or control my outcome. I wasn't resigned to just sitting back pouting about doing the time. That I converted the prison into a university for myself. I created my own curriculum. All right. And, Nelson Mandela did the same thing. He spent 27 years in prison, and when he was released, he became the president of South Africa. We have a few stories of guys who have lifted themselves up by their bootstraps. Okay, these are called redemption stories. All right, it was the same thing even with Michael Vick. After he went to prison with the dog thing, when he got out of prison, he was actually picked up by the NFL again and got an unprecedented, $120 million contract after getting out of prison. As a matter of fact, he was the highest paid quarterback ever when he got that contract. And this was after him getting out of prison, after many people in the pundits said that, he was through. His career was over with. He was done. That was the end of him, But mindset, again, attitude into magic. Your attitude has to become magic. Powerful mindset. You have to think unconventional. And so, history has a lot of this. Thomas Edison, he failed 1,000 times before he invented the light bulb and electricity. Oprah Winfrey, she was fired from her first job. Michael Jordan was cut from the high school basketball team. It just goes on and on and on. It's all about your attitude. You can't always choose what life hands you, but, you always choose your story. You choose your outcome. You choose your mindset, again, by reframing it. So you reframe the circumstances in a positive way, and you just move forward in your own way, because our mind, we can create anything with our mind. We can create worlds upon worlds upon worlds with our mind. And it all starts from the inside. The outside circumstances externally doesn't control anything. It's all about mindset. So we turn our pain into power, turn our setbacks into a setup for something great. All right. So listen, you guys have a fantastic day, and I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you soon.